Crochet Series Part 2, Blue Skies Motif.
The Blue Skies motif is really the simplest of motifs. To make one of them, it's just a chain 5, join in the ring, and work 16 double crochets in one round. If you were going to make these individually, that's simple enough to do. And if you were going to join them as you go in a traditional joining method, you would have 2 ends to weave in for every single one of those simple motifs that you made. So for example, for this 9 motif grid, you would have 9 times 2 or 18 ends to weave in. What I'm going to show you today is how you can make that super simple motif but join it to other motifs as you go without cutting yarn between motifs. We're going to be working in a kind of an unusual way because we're going to work the motifs partially and then join them as we go. It'll make a lot more sense when we get going. This is the second video in my Seamless Crochet video series, which supports my book, Seamless Crochet. You can find more information on ordering the book in the link below. Let's get started. The motifs are worked from the outside in, and so keeping in mind that a double crochet counts as a chain 3 space, we're going to work from the outside in, working our chain 5 ring and our first double crochet from this point working inward. So chain 3 for the first double crochet and chain 5 for the ring, which is 5 plus 3 or 8. So we're going to chain 8. And then we're going to slip stitch into the 5th chain from our hook. That creates our chain 5 ring. Then we're going to slip stitch in each of the next 3 chains, and those three slip stitches count the same as a chain 3 at the beginning of a round, which would count as your first double crochet. So we've slip stitched into each of those 3. We're going to pull our tail to the right of our work so we can work in the ring to the right next to the chain 3 or 3 slip stitches, and we're going to work a double crochet in the chain 5 ring. So yarn over your hook, insert your hook in the ring, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. We'll do another one. Yarn over, insert your hook in the ring, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. We'll do that again. Yarn over, insert your hook in the ring, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, we're going to work a total of 8 double crochets in our ring. Okay, so we have our 3 slip stitches, which count as a double crochet, then 8 more double crochets in our ring. I'm going to set this down on top of our existing set of motifs. You can see what we've completed. We've completed the bottom half of our first motif. At this point, we're going to leave this one partially worked, and we're going to begin the next motif. So we're going to chain 8, which counts as our chain 5 ring and the first 3 chains of a double crochet. Slip stitch into the 5th chain from your hook, and slip stitch into each of the next 3 chains. Okay, and now we want to do 8 more double crochets in the ring. So yarn over your hook, insert your hook in the ring, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. 7 more. Okay, so counting the 3 slip stitches up that 3 chain as our first double crochet, then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more double crochets in the ring, and I'll set this on top of our existing grid of motifs. You can see where we're at. We've done a partial motif on the lower side of the first and second motif, and now we're going to do that for this 3rd motif, and then we'll come across and work across the tops of those. But we stop at the midpoint of the original motif so that we can work more rows. And I'll show you what I mean. So now we're going to start with a chain 8 to begin our next motif from the outside in. We're going to slip stitch into the 5th chain from the hook to form our chain 5 ring. And then you know how we normally do a chain 3 to count as our first double crochet at the beginning of a round or a row. We're now going to slip stitch into each of these 3 chains to count as our first double crochet. Okay, we're going to work over our work. Just slide it to the side so that we can work double crochets in the ring. We're going to work yarn over, insert your hook in the ring, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. We want a total of 16 double crochets in this ring, so the 3 slip stitches count as our first, that's our second. You want a total of 16. When it gets kind of tight in there, you just want to slide your stitches over to make room. So we'll count to make sure we have the right number. I think I'm at 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. One more for a total of 16. Now we're going to slip stitch into the top of that 3rd slip stitch to join our round. That would be the equivalent of slip stitching into the top of the first double crochet or the top of the chain 3 in a regular motif. We're also going to slip stitch in between the 2 motifs to count so it looks like they're joined, and then we're going to work 7 more double crochets into the next motif. And this will be completing this partially completed motif. Okay, so now we're going to slip stitch into the top of the 3 slip stitches from the beginning of that motif to join it. Then we're going to slip stitch into the space between the 2 motifs. And we're now going to work 4 double crochets into our first motif, because we're still not ready to finish that first one. We're still doing a partial. Now instead of being halfway complete, it's 3/4 of the way complete. And I'll show you what I mean when we compare this to our finished motif. We now have 2 of our circles done, and our original is now 3/4 of the way complete. And we're now positioned, instead of positioned to the side to work motifs on the same row, we're now positioned at the very top of the motif to work additional rows going up. So now starting the next motif is done the same way. We're going to chain 8, which is beginning from the outside in, slip stitch into the 5th chain from your hook to make a chain 5 ring, and then slip stitch in each of the next 3 chains to count as our first double crochet. And now we're going to work 4 double crochets in this same ring. Okay, in seamless crochet, join as you go motifs like this, this is where I often find that I make mistakes, and if I make mistakes at this point, I'm guessing other people do as well, so I want to set this down and make a point of it. Okay, the first motif on any row after the first row, so anything that gets joined to the side and below, is the first motif of any row is only 1/4 of the way completed, because you have to join this way first before you can join. You have to, let me say that again. It's already joined on the bottom because we've moved up. So you want to make sure that you end right here. We're not going to be joining this in two places, whereas the rest of the motifs on this row will be joined at the side and the bottom. So you want to make sure that you only work a quarter of the way on this one. And whether you follow the instructions, the line by line instructions, or follow my video, you'll know to do that for this particular one. But in general, I'm just describing to you that it's really important that this one's done differently than everything else across the row. So we did our 4 double crochets and we're ready to start our next motif. We're going to slip stitch into the 5th chain from our hook to form our chain 5 ring, and then we're going to slip stitch into each of the next 3 chains to count as a double crochet. We're going to double crochet 3 times in our chain 5 ring. Okay, before we go any further, we want to slip stitch into the top of the motif in the row below. And I'm going to do it and then set it down so you can see what I did. Okay, so we've done a very little partial of our motif, then joined it down here, and now we'll come across and finish this half of the bottom of the motif. So now we're going to do 5 more double crochets in the same chain 5 ring. Okay, so now we'll set it down again, and you'll see we have our first motif on row 2 is a quarter of the way done. Our second motif on the second row is halfway completed. We started with some of the double crochet, so we did our slip stitch into the first 3 chains to count as a double crochet, 3 double crochets, then we slip stitched into the top of the motif in the row below, then we did 5 more double crochets, and we're ready to begin the next motif now. And we begin from the outside in, so we're going to chain 8, slip stitch into the 5th chain from your hook to form your chain 5 ring, and slip stitch into each of the next 3 chains to count as the first double crochet. Okay, we're going to work 3 double crochets into our chain 5 ring, okay, now we're going to slip stitch into the top of the motif from the row below. Come back and work. Now normally if this were anywhere in the middle of a row, we'd work 5 more double crochets like we did on the second motif. But now we're ready to complete this motif. So we're going to work all the way around and get our total of 16 double crochets. So I believe this is 14 at this point. Sorry, 12. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, we're going to slip stitch into the 3rd slip stitch of our 3 chains at the beginning of the round to join, which is the equivalent of joining to the top of the chain 3 at the beginning of a round to join. Slip stitch in between the motifs, and then we're going to work 7 double crochets to complete the middle motif. Slip stitch into the top of the chain 3 to join, slip stitch in the space in between the motifs, and then we're going to work 4 more double crochets into our first motif at the beginning of this row of motifs. Whoops. Okay, now we'll set it down so you can see where we're at. Okay, we have our second row of motifs joined to each other as well as joined to the row below. And our first motif, because we're not completing the outside edge of the first column of motifs until we're all the way done, we've worked up to the halfway point here. So now we're ready, halfway from the top. So now we're ready to begin our next row of motifs. So we're going to start with a chain 8. Slip stitch into the 5th chain from your hook to form your chain 5 ring. Slip stitch into each of the next 3 chains to count as our first double crochet. Then we're going to work 4 double crochets in our chain 5 ring. Okay, we'll set this down so you can see where we're at. We have a quarter completed motif for the first motif of this column and of this row, or the third motif of this column and the first motif of this row. And now we're going to work a partial in the middle, finish our first, come across and finish our second, come across and finish our third, and then we'll come back all the way down to complete this one. Starting with a chain 8. Slip stitch into the 5th chain from your hook to form the chain 5 ring. Slip stitch into each of the next 3 chains to count as a double crochet. And we'll work 3 double crochets into our chain 5 ring. Slip stitch into the top of the motif in the row below. See, so we're joined to the top of that, and now we'll work 5 more double crochets in this chain 5 ring. So there we are. We're ready to work our last motif. Chain 8. Slip stitch into each of the next 3 chains to count as a chain 3 or double crochet. And we'll work 3 more double crochets in our chain 5 ring. We want to slip stitch into the top of the double crochet, into the top of the motif in the row below. Then come back and work 12 double crochets in our same chain 5 ring, making sure we get a total of 16 double crochets for the motif. Slip stitch into the top, slip stitch at the beginning of the round to join, slip stitch into the space between the motifs, then we'll work 7 double crochets into the next motif. Slip stitch into the top slip stitch or 3rd chain to join, slip stitch into the space between the motifs. And now we're ready to not only finish our first motif in this row. We're also ready to finish the outside edge of all the motifs of column 1 as well. So for this top one, we're going to do, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're going to work 11 more double crochets in the chain 5 ring. Okay, slip stitch to the top, slip stitch at the beginning of the round to join, slip stitch into the space between the motifs, and you'll notice we're now working along this outer edge, but it's done the same exact way. So we're going to work 7 double crochets into the next motif's chain 5 ring. Slip stitch into the top, slip stitch at the beginning of that round to join, slip stitch into the space between the motifs, and I'll set it down again so you can see we're now ready to complete our very first motif with an additional 3 double crochets in the chain 5 ring. Oops. Okay, so now we'll slip stitch to join. You can fasten off at this point. And now we have 9 motifs crocheted, joined as you go, and only 2 ends to weave in. Now, if you were going to make this larger than the 9 by 9 grid, a couple things you would need to know. If you're going to increase lengthwise, you want to increase the number of middle motifs you do. Obviously you have the beginning and end that have their own set of instructions, but this middle one is the one that you would repeat as many times as you needed to grow your fabric widthwise. To grow your fabric lengthwise, or height, from the height, you would want to repeat row 2. So we increased by the columns of them in the first row to create width, and to create height you want to increase the number of rows you do from here. So I don't know if I said that correctly. Anyway, so if we did row 1, we would continue to do row 2 over and over and over again, and leaving that the side of the first column incomplete, and then when we got to the top, that's when we would come along and complete the first column. There are more videos in this series of seamless crochet videos. I'll post a link to that below, and it's a continuation of a series from my book Seamless Crochet, so check back. There will be more videos as we go. I'm also offering it in left-handed and right-handed versions. Those will also be listed and linked to in the video description below. Please subscribe to my channel for new videos.